Snow erases the road first, then the fence posts. By dusk, the only thing left of the mountain is a single house, glass and black concrete, lit from inside like a lantern someone forgot. On the nightstand of the largest bedroom sits a small amber bottle, 30 white tablets, a dying man's medicine. The cars come up the switchbacks one at a time, headlights swinging. A daughter who hasn't called in a year, a son who owes money to dangerous men, a young wife who married an old gangster and learned to smile through it. They embrace at the door. They mean none of it. Victor Yoon built an empire on fear and patience. He has gathered the people closest to him to tell them how he will divide it. He has 3 months to live. He will not survive the weekend. One of these guests will kill him. The snow will make sure no one can leave. Welcome to this amazing story world, friends. Please like, share, and subscribe. The house was called Goyo, stillness. Victor Yoon had named it himself the year he bought the mountain it stood on, and for 30 years almost no one had been allowed past the gate. It sat 2 hours above Pyeongchang, where the road turned to switchbacks and the pine gave way to bare rock. From the highway, it was invisible. That was the point. Mr. O, the caretaker, had been salting the steps since noon. He was 71 and had worked for the family longer than any of the children had been alive. He watched the cars climb and said nothing. He had buried 2 dogs and 1 wife on this mountain, and he did not like guests. The first car belonged to Clara Yoon. She parked precisely, the way she did everything, and sat for a moment with the engine off. 40 years old, the boss's daughter. She ran the legitimate half of the empire. 11 hotels, a resort, a construction firm with clean books, and she had not spoken to her father since the previous winter. She checked her phone. No signal. She had expected that. "You look like your mother," Mr. O said, taking her bag. "Don't," Clara said. Not unkindly, just done. The son came next, and the son was already drunk. Danny Yoon was 35 and moved through the world like a man expecting a door to slam. He had his father's jaw and none of his father's nerve. He owed money. Everyone in the family knew he owed money. The only question was the number, and the number had a way of growing every time it was spoken aloud. He hugged his sister too hard at the door, and she let him. "Has he said anything?" Danny whispered. "About the will?" "We just got here." "He's going to make us wait. He always makes us wait." Inside, the house was warm and enormous and quiet. A wall of glass framed the storm. There was a long concrete table, a fireplace the size of a doorway, and very little else because Victor believed that empty rooms were honest and full rooms had something to hide. A young woman in a gray cardigan came down the stairs carrying a folded blanket. This was Bianca Adamola, and she did not belong here, and she knew it. She was 33, a palliative care nurse, and 2 weeks ago she took a private contract she could not afford to refuse. Her mother's hospital bills had a shape now, a monthly shape, and this job paid in 1 month what the wards paid in 4. The lawyer had hired her. The patient was a dying man on a mountain who wanted to die at home. That was all she had been told. She had learned the rest slowly and with a cooling stomach. "Mr. Yoon is resting. He'll come down for dinner." Clara looked at her the way you look at a piece of furniture you didn't order. "And you are?" "His nurse. My father doesn't like strangers in the house. Father is dying," Bianca said, and went to lay the blanket on the chair by the fire. Snow kept falling. By 6, the rest of them had arrived, and the road behind them was already gone. Mina Yoon came down last, and the room rearranged itself around her without anyone deciding to. She was 38, the boss's second wife, married 5 years, and she had the particular stillness of a woman who had spent those 5 years being looked at and deciding what to let people see. She kissed her stepdaughter's cheek. Clara did not kiss back. "You drove up alone?" Mina asked. "I prefer it." "Of course you do." 2 men stood by the fire, not quite together. The first was Thompson Obi, 60 years old, broad, slow-moving, a large black man with reading glasses pushed up into close-cropped gray hair, and a face that gave away nothing because it had been trained out of him a long time ago. He had been Victor's right hand for 31 years. He had gone to prison once for 4 years for something the boss had done, and had come out and said thank you. Everyone in the room assumed Thompson would inherit the other empire, the real one, the one with no clean books. He did not look like a man waiting to inherit anything. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the drive. Before dinner, Bianca found him at the sideboard with a glass of water and a small enamel pillbox. "Cardiac?" Bianca asked. "Professional habit." "Heart's been bad for years." He shook a small white tablet into his palm. "Digoxin. The doctor keeps saying he'll change it. He never does." "You should keep your levels checked. Digoxin's narrow. Too little does nothing. Too much—" She stopped herself, lecturing. An old fault. "Too much and—" "Too much and it stops being medicine." Thompson smiled, barely, and swallowed the pill dry, and that was the end of it. She thought nothing more of it. There was no reason to. The accountant arrived at the table sweating despite the cold. Henry Hahn had handled the family's money for 19 years, and he handled it the way a man handles a snake he has decided to keep as a pet. He was 50, soft, and he laughed half a second early at things that were not jokes. He had brought a laptop bag and would not put it down. The last to sit was Kate Kang, the lawyer, 55, sharp as a folded knife, in a charcoal suit that had no business on a mountain. She placed a slim leather folder beside her plate and rested 2 fingers on it, the way you rest a hand on a child you don't trust in a crowd. Inside that folder was the will. Everyone knew it. No one looked at it directly, which is its own kind of looking. Then Victor came down. He came down slowly, one hand on the rail, and the room stood without being asked. He was 68 and the cancer had taken weight off him. His collar stood away from his neck, but his eyes were the same eyes that had run a city's worth of fear for 4 decades. He sat at the head of the table. He looked at each of them in turn, unhurried, the way a man counts cattle. "My children," he said, "my family. Thank you for coming so far in such bad weather." Nobody pointed out that he had not given them a choice. Dinner was quiet and excellent. Mr. O served. The storm pressed its face against the glass. Victor ate almost nothing. Halfway through, he set down his chopsticks and squinted up at the ceiling. "These lights," he said. "Oh, did you change the bulbs?" "No, sir. They're yellow. Everything's yellow tonight." He waved it off, irritated. "Cheap bulbs. The whole country. Cheap now." Mina said the light looked the same as always. Victor grunted and changed the subject, and the moment closed over like water. After the plates were cleared, Bianca brought him the amber bottle and a glass of water because that was the schedule, and the schedule was laminated, and Thompson had handed her the laminated schedule on her first day with an apology for how thorough the doctor had been. Victor took the bottle. He did not put on his reading glasses. He shook 2 tablets into his hand without looking at them and swallowed them and drank. And Bianca noticed it only the way you notice a small wrong note in a song you're not really listening to. Because earlier that day, she had watched him hold a jar of honey at arm's length, glasses on, reading the label twice. "Never trust a label," he'd told her, almost cheerful. 60 years I've stayed alive not trusting labels. But his own medicine he swallowed blind. She filed it nowhere. There was no file for it yet. "Tomorrow," Victor announced, "after breakfast, we'll talk about the future. All of it. Tonight, sleep. The mountain doesn't care what we want." Danny caught his sister on the stairs. "Tomorrow," he hissed. "It's tomorrow." "Go to bed, Danny." In his study, Victor Yoon sat alone for a long time. On the desk, beside the lamp, a small black recorder turned its slow red eye. He had been recording all weekend. He recorded everything. It was an old habit, from the years when a man's own memory could be subpoenaed out of him, and he had never broken it. He looked at the recorder. He almost spoke. He didn't, not yet. Outside, the snow climbed the glass another inch. By morning, the road was a rumor. The valley below had vanished. The generator hummed in its shed and the power held, and that was the only good news the day would offer. They gathered after breakfast in the room with the long table. Kate set her leather folder down. Henry clutched his laptop bag. Clara stood by the window with her arms crossed. Danny couldn't sit still. Mina sat very straight. Thompson stood behind the boss's chair like he had stood behind it for 31 years. Victor did not sit. He walked the length of the glass wall, slow, and when he turned around, he was smiling, and the smile was wrong. "I'm not dying," he said. Silence. The fire popped. "The scans are forged. The diagnosis is forged. The pills my nurse has been so kindly feeding me are sugar. I am as healthy as I was 10 years ago, and I will likely outlive every person in this room." Bianca felt the floor tilt. 2 weeks. 2 weeks of charts and dosages and quiet, careful kindness to a man who would not die of anything but old age. Her face went hot. "Why?" Clara said, flat, furious. "Because one of you sold me." He let it sit. "Someone in my family has been talking to the prosecutors for months. I don't yet know which of you, but I know the shape of it, and I know it is someone in this house. So I built a dying man. A dying man makes people honest. A dying man makes you show you their hands." He spread his own. "I wanted to watch you all reach for what's mine. I wanted to see who reached first and who reached crooked." Danny had gone the color of paper. Henry had stopped breathing. Kate's 2 fingers pressed white on the leather folder. Only Thompson did not move. Bianca, watching the room, because watching rooms was her work, saw it. Everyone flinched. Thompson looked at the floor, and his face did the thing it always did, which was nothing. "Enjoy the snow," Victor said. "We're all here until it melts. Plenty of time." He went up to his study and shut the door. He did not come down for lunch. That was unusual. He did not come down for dinner. Mr. O knocked, no answer. Mr. O, who had knocked on that door for 30 years and knew its silences, came back down with a face like a closed shop and said the boss's voice should be asked for. It was Bianca and Thompson who went up together. The door was not locked. It was simply shut, the way a door is shut by someone who expects to open it again. Victor Yoon sat in his chair behind the desk, head tipped back, mouth slightly open. The lamp was on. The recorder was not. On the desk, the amber bottle stood with its cap off. Bianca was at his side before she had decided to move. No pulse. The skin still held a little warmth. Not long then, an hour, maybe less. His eyes, when she lifted a lid, were nothing. She looked at the slack face of a man she had been hired to keep comfortable and had been lied to by a man and felt absurdly grief. "His heart," Thompson said from the doorway, quiet, certain. "He told us his heart was fine. He told us a great many things." She looked up at Thompson. He was looking at the body, and his expression was the expression of a man at a funeral he had long expected to attend. The family came up the stairs in a clot. Danny saw his father and made a sound and turned away. Clara did not turn away. She stood in the door and looked for a long, cold moment, and what was on her face was not nothing, but it was not grief either. Mina put a hand over her mouth. Henry said, "Oh God, twice, and Kate said sharply, "Don't touch anything," which was a lawyer's reflex, and also an interesting thing to say first. "We have to call the police," Mina said. "With what phone?" Kate said. "On what road?" "When the snow clears," Thompson said, "we will do what this family does, quietly, carefully." Now, viewers, comment where you are watching from and who you think killed the boss, Victor Yoon. And there it was. They were a crime family standing over the body of its head, and the last thing any of them truly wanted was a uniform in the house. Bianca heard herself speak. He didn't die of his heart. They all looked at her. He didn't have a heart condition. He didn't have cancer. He told us this morning himself he was healthy. A healthy man of 68 does not simply stop. She made herself keep going. Something killed him, and the road is closed, which means whatever killed him is still in this house. The fire 2 floors down was the only sound. "You're a nurse," Clara said slowly, "not a detective." "No, but I'm the only person here who was hired by no one in this family, who inherits nothing, and who has spent 2 weeks watching every one of you." She stood up from the body. Her hands were steady, which surprised her. "I'd like to keep watching until the road opens, unless someone here would rather I didn't." Nobody said they'd rather she didn't, which, in that house, was the same as a yes. They moved the body to the cold room off the kitchen because the dead cannot stay at a desk, and Mr. O covered him with a sheet and the weekend became something else. Bianca began with the study because the study was where he had died. The recorder was gone. She was nearly sure of it. She had seen it the first night, a small black device with a red light, sitting beside the lamp. The boss had a habit, she'd assumed, of dictating notes. Now the desk held a lamp and a blotter and a bottle and a clean rectangle in the dust where something had been. The amber bottle she did not touch with her fingers. She lifted it with a handkerchief and looked at the tablets inside. White. Identical to the white tablets she had been administering for 2 weeks. She tipped one onto the blotter and pressed it. It crumbled. Chalky. Soft. Too soft. Placebo. Sugar. Just as he'd said. So the boss had taken his harmless evening pills, the way he took them every night, blind, without his glasses, trusting them, and an hour later, he was dead. She stood very still with that for a while. She started the interviews after the house went to bed, because in her experience, the truth came out of people when they were tired and frightened and it was dark. Henry came first, because Henry would not have been able to bear being last. "Where were you," she asked, "between dinner ending and Mr. O knocking on the study door?" "My room. Working. I always work." He laughed, half a second early. "Working on what?" "The accounts. There's always—" He stopped. His hands found each other. "Look, you're going to find out anyway, you all are, so— the books. The boss's books." He swallowed. "There are problems in the books. Money that moved where it shouldn't. He'd asked Mrs. Kang to do a review, a full review, starting next month. If that review happened, He didn't finish. "You'd be ruined." "I'd be worse than ruined. You don't understand what these people do to a man who—" He caught himself again, looked at her, and finished quietly. "I didn't kill him, but I burned papers tonight in the study fireplace downstairs after dinner. I burned 3 years of papers. I'm telling you that so when you find the ash, you don't think it's something it isn't." He wiped his face. "It's only fraud. It's only that. It's only fraud. In this house, a confession to theft was offered as an alibi. Mina came next, and Mina lied. She said she had been in her room all evening. She said it smoothly and well, and Bianca let her say it, and then said, "I came up to check on Mr. Yoon before dinner, around 5. You were in the east corridor, the corridor that only goes to his study." Mina's smooth face did not crack. It simply paused. "I was getting ice. There's no ice machine in the east corridor. Then I was lost. It's a large house. You've lived here 5 years. The fire ticked. Mina looked at her for a long moment, recalculating, and Bianca watched a woman decide how much of a smaller lie to spend in order to protect a larger one. I don't have to talk to a nurse, Mina said, and stood and left, and that was an answer too. Clara, in the morning, was more honest, and the honesty was its own wall. My father, she said, killed my mother, not with his hands. He had a wife who loved him, and he made her small, year after year, until there was nothing of her to be afraid for, and then he found a younger one. She nodded at the ceiling, in the direction of Mina's room. My mother walked into the sea at Sokcho 11 years ago, and the family called it her health. I have hated my father every day since. I want you to write that down, since you're playing detective. I had every reason in the world to want him dead. Bianca did not write it down. Where were you last night? On the phone. In my room. There's no signal on this mountain. There's a signal, Clara said, if you stand at the north window with a satellite handset, which I own, because I run 11 hotels and I do not stop running them because my father wants to play games in the snow. A pause. I was negotiating the sale of those hotels to a Singaporean group. I have not told my family, because the moment I do, the criminal half of this family will want their hands in it, and I have spent my whole life trying to keep one clean room in a filthy house. She met Bianca's eyes. That is what I was doing, selling the only thing of mine that was ever mine. Believe it or don't. Every door Bianca opened had a secret behind it. None of the secrets were the same shape as the murder. It was Danny who looked guiltiest, and it was Danny the whole house had quietly decided on. He had no alibi. He admitted it before she asked. He had drunk most of a bottle of soju alone in the game room after his father's announcement, and he had no memory of the hours that mattered. He awoke on the game room floor when the shouting started. He could not say where he had been. He could not say what he had done. And he had the oldest motive in the world. He owed money. Bianca finally heard the number, and the number was the kind of number that ends a person, and he owed it to men who hurt people. And the will everyone had come for, was the only door out.
You needed your father's death, Bianca said gently. You needed the inheritance, and you needed it now. Danny laughed, and the laugh turned wet. Is that what it looks like? Doesn't it? Ask Henry. He dragged the sleeve across his face. Ask Henry about the money. She asked Henry, and the most popular theory in the house died on the accountant's laptop. 3 months ago, Henry said, turning the screen, the boss settled his son's debts, all of them, every one. He didn't tell Danny it was generosity. He never did anything that felt like generosity. He told him it was a leash. Henry scrolled. These men Danny owed, they're enemies of the boss. Old enemies. As long as the boss was alive, those men would not touch a hair on Danny's head because the boss had paid and the boss was the boss. The day the boss died, Danny loses his protection. Danny becomes a debt to be collected by people who hate his father. Henry closed the laptop. He didn't need the boss dead. He needed the boss alive more than any of us. The boss alive was the only roof over that boy's head. Bianca sat with it. The drunk, alibi-less son, the obvious answer, and the obvious answer had been needing his father to keep breathing. She crossed him out. The house, when she told them at breakfast, did not want to cross him out. The house liked him for it, but the ledger was the ledger. The storm did not break. It deepened. The generator coughed once in the night and held. Bianca went back to the study because she had run out of people, and a room cannot lie. The amber bottle, the placebo, the missing recorder, the clean rectangle in the dust. She thought about the recorder for a long time. Someone had taken it. The boss recorded everything. She'd seen the red light. She'd assumed dictation. But a man hunting a traitor in his own family would record more than dictation. He would record them all weekend. If the recorder still existed, it might hold the voice of whoever had walked into that study last, which meant the killer had taken it, which meant the killer had needed to. She found the bottle's history next, because she was a nurse, and nurses chased the chain of a drug. Who filled it? Who refilled it? The laminated schedule in her own folder, in handwriting that was not the boss's, and not any doctor she'd ever spoken to. She had never, she realized, spoken to the doctor. Not once. Every instruction had come through one set of hands. Thompson had handed her the schedule on her first day. Thompson had apologized for how thorough the doctor had been. She set that down, carefully, beside other things, and did not yet pick it back up, because the house, by then, had found someone to be sure about, and the house was sure about Mina. It came apart on the fourth night, and it came apart loudly. It was Kate, the lawyer, who lit it. She had spent the snowed-in days doing the one thing a lawyer cannot stop doing, which was preparing a case, and she stood up after dinner with her leather folder and laid the case on the concrete table. "The accounts Mr. Hahn was so frightened of," Kate said. "I've seen enough of them now. Money has been leaving this family for 3 years, not crudely, patiently, through a chain of accounts that ends offshore. And the patience is the tell, because Mr. Hahn is not patient." She turned. "Mrs. Yoon, Mina, the offshore structure is yours. Your maiden name is on the second company. I found it an hour ago." Mina did not move. "5 years ago," Kate continued, "you married a man 40 years older with a reputation that should have frightened any sane young woman. I wondered why, so I looked at your family. Your father owned a shipping firm in Incheon. 22 years ago, Victor Yoon took that firm apart, piece by piece, and your father went to prison for 3 years for things your father had not done, and came home and did not recover, and died." Kate let it land. "You did not marry Victor Yoon. You infiltrated him, and for 5 years you have been bleeding his empire into accounts only you can reach. Revenge and theft in one long marriage." Every face in the room turned to Mina. Her stillness finally broke, but it broke into something harder than fear. "Yes," she said. "All of it. Yes." The fire snapped. "He ruined my father for a warehouse lease. A lease. So I learned to smile at him. I learned to be the soft young thing he wanted on his arm, and every month for 5 years I moved his money out from under him, and he never felt it, because men like him cannot imagine being stolen from by something they think they own." She lifted her chin. "Yes, I was in the East Corridor before dinner that first night. Yes, I was in his study yesterday afternoon. Yes, I have been in that study 100 times, going through his desk while he napped. I touched that pill bottle. I moved it to reach a drawer. My fingerprints are all over it. Go ahead, find them." Henry had his face in his hands. Danny was staring, and Bianca at the edge of the room felt the whole house lean as one body toward the conclusion. The grasping young wife, the long con, the hatred 22 years deep, the fingerprints on the bottle, the lies about the corridor. She had walked them through every door of her own guilt. "You killed him," Clara said quietly. "You finally got everything, and you killed him." "Lock her in," Henry said, "until the road clears. Lock her in." And they did. They put Mina in the east guest room, and Thompson turned the key himself, and the house exhaled, because the house had its answer, and the answer was a stranger they had never really let inside.
Bianca stood at the foot of the stairs and could not exhale. She sat up that night with the boss's medical chart, her own chart, 2 weeks of her own neat handwriting, open on her knees, and she made herself read it as if a colleague had written it, and a colleague had got it wrong. Day 3, patient reports nausea, no appetite, pulse 48, irregular. She had written consistent with disease progression. She had written it because she had been told he had a disease. Day 5, patient irritable, complains repeatedly that lighting is too yellow, no change to fixtures, visual disturbance noted. She had written advancing.
She set the chart down on the cold floor of the dark house and felt the bottom drop out of 2 weeks of careful, kind, mistaken work. A healthy man does not have a slow, irregular pulse. A healthy man does not lose his appetite to nausea for days. A healthy man does not look up from his dinner and complain that the whole world has turned yellow, does not see around every lamp a wash of gold that is not there. She had seen that yellow before. In a textbook, in a ward once, in an old woman whose family had refilled a prescription too many times. Xanthopsia, yellow-green vision, halos around lights, nausea, a pulse gone slow and strange, the body of a man whose heart was being quietly, steadily told to stop. Digoxin, too much of it, it stops being medicine. The boss had not been dying. The boss had been being poisoned for days in small, careful amounts, long before the snow had even closed the road. Someone had been feeding death to a healthy man, and the symptoms had hidden inside a disease that did not exist, and she, the nurse, had charted every step of the murder in her own hand and called it cancer. She stood up in the dark. She knew now what had killed him. The question was the bottle. The amber bottle on the nightstand held sugar. She had crushed a tablet herself. Chalk, placebo, harmless. The boss had said so, and the boss had been right. And yet the boss had swallowed his evening pills and died within the hour. Unless the pills in the bottle that evening had not been sugar. Unless someone had swapped the harmless tablets for digoxin, identical, white, small, and then, after the boss was dead, swapped them back. A killer with an hour alone before Mr. O ever knocked. A killer who knew the boss would not check, would not squint, would not put on his glasses, because the boss knew his pills were sugar. He had told the whole family so that very morning, with a showman's pride. The pills my nurse has been feeding me are sugar. He had announced his own blindness. He had told the killer exactly how to do it. And only one kind of person could have used that. Not someone who merely guessed the illness was fake, someone who had built it, because the boss trusted those pills absolutely, and a man like Victor Yoon trusted nothing absolutely, except the few things he had constructed himself, with his own most loyal hands. A dying man needs forged scans. Forged scans need a forger. The fake diagnosis, the fake doctor she had never spoken to, the laminated schedule and handwriting that was not a physician's. The whole architecture of a dying man had been built by someone the boss trusted to build it. Thompson Obi handed her that schedule on her first day. Bianca went down to the cold room before dawn, and she lifted the sheet, and she looked at Victor Yoon's right hand, and she found on the inside of 2 fingers the faint chalk residue of a man who had crushed a placebo tablet to check it, once, days ago, idly curious, and been reassured. She thought about Thompson at the sideboard the first night. Digoxin. The doctor keeps saying he'll change it, he never does. Said openly. Said the way you say a thing that is true, because the truest lies are the ones you never have to take back. She stood in the cold room a long time. She gathered them in the morning, all of them, in the room with the long table and the wall of snow. She had Mr. O bring Mina down from the locked room. The house objected. She let it object and waited, and the house, having no detective of its own, gave way. Mina didn't kill him, Bianca said. She confessed to everything, Clara said. She confessed to robbing him. That's not the same as killing him, and the difference is the whole case. Bianca turned to Mina. Your offshore accounts, the chain of companies, tell them what was unfinished. Mina looked at her for a moment, and something in the lawyer-built trap loosened. She said slowly, there was a final transfer, the largest. It needed his authorization, a signature, a code, on a date 3 weeks from now. The structure only works if he's alive to sign. If he dies before that date, the holding freezes. Everything in it locks. Her voice changed, hearing herself. If he died this weekend, I lost more than anyone. I lost 5 years of work in a single night. You needed him alive for 3 more weeks, exactly like his son needed him alive. The 2 people in this house who looked guiltiest both needed his heart to keep beating. That's not a coincidence. That's a design. Someone wanted you both standing in the light so that no one would look into the dark behind you.
The room had gone very quiet. Victor Yoon was not dying of anything, she went on. He told us so himself, and it was the one true thing he said all weekend. But he is dead, so something killed a healthy man. She set her chart on the concrete table, 2 weeks of her own handwriting. For the last several days of his life, he had no appetite, he was nauseous, his pulse was slow and irregular, and he kept complaining that the lights had turned yellow, that the world had gone gold and cheap. Nobody else saw it, only him. I wrote it down and I called it cancer, because I'd been told he had cancer. She looked up. He didn't. Those are the signs of a heart being slowly poisoned. Digoxin, a drug that is medicine in a small dose and a murder weapon just above it, given quietly, over days, hidden inside an illness that was never real. Henry made a small sound. Kate's 2 fingers had gone still on her folder.
The night he died, Bianca said, he took his evening pills the way he took them every night, without his glasses, without checking, blind. Because he had told this whole family, with great pride, that those pills were harmless sugar. He'd announced his own habit. He told the killer exactly how to kill him. All it took was a bottle swapped for an hour and swapped back. White tablet for white tablet. She let the fire fill the silence. And here is the thing that closes the door. A healthy, suspicious man does not swallow pills blind for just anyone. Victor Yoon trusted those tablets completely, and he trusted almost nothing completely. He trusted them because he had watched them be made harmless. The fake illness, the forged scans, the doctor no one ever met, the schedule and handwriting that belonged to no physician. Somebody built all of that for him, with him, his co-conspirator, the one person on this mountain who knew the illness was a lie before he ever announced it. The one person who could swap a poison into a bottle of sugar and know for certain that Victor Yoon would never once look down. She turned. She had not looked at him until now. Now she did. You handed me the medication schedule on my first day, Mr. Obi. You apologized for how thorough the doctor had been. There was no doctor. You wrote it. You built the dying man. The room turned with her. Thompson Obi stood by the fire where he had stood for 31 years, behind a chair that was no longer there. He did not run. There was nowhere to run. The snow had seen to that, and so had something older than the snow. He looked, Bianca thought, the way he had looked over the body the first night, like a man at a funeral he had always known he would attend. He had no motive, Clara said, but her voice had no floor under it. He was going to inherit everything, the whole organization. Why would he? That's why nobody looked at him, Bianca said quietly. The man with the most to gain by waiting. But he never wanted the organization. Did you, Mr. Obi? You said it yourself the first night, and we all heard humility. I don't want it. It wasn't humility. It was true. Thompson reached into his jacket. The room flinched. He drew out, slowly, an old photograph, soft at the corners from being carried, and he did not look at it because he did not need to. My son, he said, would have been 40 this year. Nobody breathed. His name was Daniel. He worked for the boss, like I did, like I'd raised him to, and 22 years ago he started to ask questions a young man shouldn't ask, and he wanted to leave, and a man does not simply leave the boss. Thompson's voice was terribly level. I was told it was the Daejeon people, a rival crew. I was told my boy was killed in a dispute over routes, and I believed it because the man who told me was the man I had given my whole life to, and a man has to believe in something. He turned the photograph over in his fingers. I buried my son and I went back to work the next week because that is what loyalty is. I stood behind that chair for 22 more years. The fire was the only sound on the mountain. 2 years ago, Thompson said, Henry's old files. The boss had me move some boxes, archive things, and in a box that should have held nothing, there was a record, an old payment, an instruction. He finally looked up and his eyes were dry, and that was the worst of it.
It was the boss. It was always the boss. He killed my son for asking to be free, and then he came to my house and sat at my table and told me a lie about Dejan and watched me cry and let me keep serving him. 22 years. Danny had sat down without seeming to know it. Mina's hand was at her throat. So I sold him, Thompson said simply. I am the one the prosecutors have, not Mrs. Kang for all her dealings with the rival families. That's just business. She'd sell her own grandmother. Not Henry, not the boy. Me. I have spent a year quietly handing the boss's empire to the people who will dismantle it, because I wanted him to lose everything before he lost his life. He looked at the photograph. And then he announced a dying man and a weekend in the snow, and I understood. He was hunting his traitor. He was hunting me. He would have known by spring, so I used the dying man he asked me to build. I put my own heart medicine in his sugar bottle, 3 nights, then 4, and then I let an old habit kill him. He never checked. He trusted me to have it made safe. I had. For 31 years, I had made everything safe for him. He should not have stopped expecting it. Bianca said, gently, "And the recorder?" I took it from the desk after. For the first time, something moved in his face. I thought it would have his last hours on it, his voice. I didn't want to give the prosecutors his voice along with everything else, even now. He shook his head at himself, an old man amazed at an old man. Loyalty. It doesn't switch off once you learn it was a sin. It just keeps running with nowhere left to go. He set the photograph on the concrete table, face up, where they could all see the boy. "That's all," he said. "I'm tired. I've been tired for 22 years." The road opened on the 6th day. It opened the way mountain roads do, an hour at a time, the plow's orange light crawling up the switchbacks from the valley. The prosecutors had been waiting longer than the snow. They had been waiting more than the snow, it turned out, for Thompson's last delivery, and when he didn't make it, they had simply come up the mountain to collect everything at once: the empire, the books, the body, and the man. Thompson went down with them without a word. He took nothing. At the door, he stopped once and looked back into the house called Stillness, at the wall of glass and the cold concrete table, and whatever he saw there, he kept to himself. The family stayed behind to be ruined in the slower, paperwork way. Henry would lose everything to the review he had burned papers to escape. Kate would answer for the rival families. Mina's frozen offshore holding would never thaw. 5 years of patient revenge had locked itself shut the night her target died, and the irony of that was not lost on her, standing in the snow. Clara would sell her clean hotels to Singapore and at last have one room with no blood in the corner of it, and would find, the way you do, that the room was quieter than she'd hoped. Danny stood at the window watching the police cars go. Bianca was the last to leave. She had a contract that no longer meant anything and a mother in a hospital who still did, and she packed her gray cardigan and her 2 weeks of charts and went to give Mr. O the keys. It was Mr. O who handed her the recorder. "Found it in his coat," the old man said. "Thompson's coat, in the hall. He left it. On purpose, I think. He left it where someone careful would find it." He pressed it into her hand and went back to salting steps that no longer needed salt, because salting steps was the thing he knew how to do. She did not play it until she was in her car, halfway down the mountain, with the valley opening below her and the heater ticking. There was a great deal on it, days of it. The dinner, the announcement, the snow. She moved past it all to the end, to the last file, recorded the night he died. It was Victor Yoon, alone in his study, and his voice was not the boss's voice. It was only an old man's. He said he knew. He said he had known since autumn that it was Thompson, that no one else could have reached the prosecutors so cleanly, and that the moment he understood, he had also understood why. He said the name Daniel, the dead son's name, twice, slowly, like a man testing whether he could still bear the weight of it, and finding that he could not. He said he could have run. He said he could have had it done. One phone call, even on a mountain, even in the snow, had Thompson dealt with the way he had dealt with Thompson's boy. He said he had built a dying man and a gathering and a hunt for a traitor so that the family would have a story, so that there would be noise and theory and suspicion, so that no one would ever simply ask the quiet question. He said he was tired of being afraid of the dark that he himself had made. And then he said, to the empty room, to the recorder, to the man he knew would come up the stairs, "Old friend, the bottle is on the nightstand. I won't put on my glasses. I never have." The recording ended. Bianca sat in the car with the engine running and the heater ticking and the white valley spread out clean below her, and she did not cry quite, though she came near it. Two men had spent 31 years building something between them, and in the end, one handed the other the means and the privacy and the blind, trusting habit and called it a trap when it was a sentence he had passed on himself. The boss had not been murdered exactly. He had been forgiven the only way a man like that could ever be forgiven, which is to say, not at all and completely. She put the recorder in the glove box. She would give it to the prosecutors. It would not save Thompson Obie. Nothing now would save Thompson Obie. But it would tell them why. And the why was the only true thing left on the whole mountain. And a thing that true should not be lost in the snow. She drove down toward the valley and the hospital and the bills and her mother, who was alive, who was simply, ordinarily alive. And Bianca Adamola found that for the first time in 2 weeks, that ordinary fact felt like more money than the dead man had ever owned. Behind her, the house called Stillness stood empty in the white, lit by nothing now, and the snow, having finished its work, began very quietly to melt.